Hi, writers. Thank you so much for joining me. In this video, we're going to be looking at a sample essay number 2, which also scored a 3 in the Accuplacer Writeplacer English as a Second Language prompt. And if this is something that interests you, please stay tuned. If not, please take a look at some of the other videos that I have on poetry analysis, on the ACT. I write paragraphs and help students write paragraphs for middle school and also for high school. So I appreciate you sticking it out if you would like to take a look at this particular essay. If you remember, the prompt involves receiving a large sum of money, and your decision is whether to save it, invest it, or spend it, or again, a host of other ideas that may come to mind, especially when you are under time constraints and you're having to write an essay about it. So in this case, this particular essay, I wanted to zoom out first because I wanted you to see and notice, right, writers, that the student definitely broke up their essay into paragraphs. And as you can see here, we have 6 different paragraphs representing this essay. So I do really like that about how the student separated out their paragraphs. It makes it a lot easier to read. It helps with the organization of the essay. And so I wanted to make sure that I pointed that out before we start zooming in on the individual paragraphs. So now I'm going to go ahead and start zooming in to the individual paragraphs, and we'll take a look at the sentence structure, the word use, the grammar that we see, so we can see how the student did based on what we have here. So the first paragraph begins with, if someday I receive a large sum of money, like the woman of the example, one of the first things I would do is to take a nice trip to Europe and know all the historical places. It would take a really long time, but it's worthy. Okay, so one of the things that the student did is that they referenced the prompt, and they didn't really tell us what the prompt was about. And so in this case, I would just take that out, and I would say something like, if someday I would receive a large sum of money, comma, one of the first things I would do is take a nice trip to Europe, period. So um, this is a fragment. So their first sentence, by just saying, if someday I receive a large sum of money, like the woman of the example. So they start with what looks like is about to be a complex sentence. Instead, it turns into a fragment because we never get the rest of the sentence. We never get what's called the independent clause. Instead, we just have the dependent clause, and basically that would be considered just a fragment. Now let's take a look. And yes, I do see obviously some capitalization issues with I, the pronoun, and we see some spelling, and we see words that are capitalized, like someday, when it should not be capitalized. Let's take a look at the next sentence. One of the first things I would do is to take a nice trip to Europe and know all the historical places. So that is a what would be considered a simple sentence, and it's written correctly. Obviously, we see some capitalization issues, and we're missing some prepositions. So one of the first things I would do is to take a nice trip to Europe and know all of the historical places. So of is missing between the all and the. Moving on to the next sentence, it would take a really long time, but it's worthy. So in this case, the student actually made a compound sentence, and so they should have a comma after time because you have a conjunction but. And then we have but it's worthy. But it is worthy. Remember, right writers, we want to avoid contractions. Please write out contractions rather than it's, because it's too conversational. Obviously, we see a capitalization issue with would. However, they do focus on one idea, which is going to Europe. They reference that it would take a long time, but that it would be worthy of their time. So, but it's worthy. But again, we see again a fragment followed by a simple sentence, followed by a compound sentence, but they're missing the comma before the conjunction. Let's move on to paragraph 2. In this paragraph, it says, after travel over Europe, my second choice would be to get a really nice guitar gear. So the first issue that I see, I do like how they transitioned. So after traveling over Europe, we don't travel over the country, we're traveling within the country, or we can say after traveling through Europe. Then they would want to have a comma. My second choice would be to purchase some really nice guitar gear. It would be a word use issue. So instead of getting, I would say purchasing or buying some really nice guitar gear instead of a really nice guitar gear. This use of a as an article is awkward. So I just want to point that out. And yes, of course, we see some capitalization issues. M and S and C should not be capitalized. The other thing I would point out is it sounds a bit elementary when we're saying, like, the first thing I would do, my second choice, or the second thing I would do. It sounds a bit elementary, and I just wanted to point that out. Now, but again, this sentence works after travel over Europe. My second choice would be to get a really nice guitar gear. So in this case, it sort of is acting like a simple sentence because they did not put a pronoun after I travel through Europe or after I travel throughout Europe, comma, then it would end up being a complex sentence. Moving on to the next part. Lots of new music equipment. Okay, that is considered a fragment. And so they should have added it into the first sentence and said something like, my second choice would be to purchase really nice guitar gear and lots of new music equipment. That would be a better decision rather than just lots of new music equipment, because again, that affects the sentence use. And obviously, we see capitalization issues. Words that are capitalized that should not be capitalized. In the next sentence, and play like a freak for a couple of years. Okay, so a little bit too casual. So we don't it's number one, it's a fragment, but number two, saying that you're playing something like a freak for a couple of years is a bit awkward, um, and not as academic and as formal as we would want it to be in an essay. Then the student moves on, use money to have a nice own studio and do some nice recording. So another fragment has come up because they talk about, we don't have a subject. So they should say something like, I would also use the money to have have a nice studio, have my own studio, and do some, recordings. So they have nice on top of nice, which also references that they lack the word use to come up with a different vocabulary word rather than nice and nice. Again, the issue that I see is that it's a fragment. However, everything does go together as far as their organization of the ideas. It's all focused on guitar, music equipment, and a studio and recordings. So everything is connected in that paragraph, which is refreshing for the reader. The next paragraph, in paragraph 3, the student then says, when I achieve the mini musical adventure, I would do some business for sure. Very nice transition. We go to a complex sentence, and I like this idea of the mini musical adventure. That's really interesting. And so I might do. The student is missing a comma, so they would want to say something like, "When I achieve the mini musical adventure, comma, I would do some business for sure, or I would transition into business, or I would move into business." And then this idea of for sure definitely has slang and casual voice, which is something we want to avoid in academic writing. Then to the next sentence. To be more specific, they should have a comma there. To be more specific, comma, I would be really pleased being inversionist. I think is what they're trying to say, rather than inversionist. Or they would really what they want to say, I would be really pleased being an investor, perhaps. Because when I think of inversion, I think of someone who's able to manipulate their body, or being on an inversion table where I'm placed upside down. So that is something that is interesting with this part. But it is a simple sentence. It's written correctly, the only other than the I here and the comma, but we're confused by the word inversion sit. Then the next sentence says, one of my first invest would be in telecommunications companies and liquor enterprises too. Okay, so um not too bad, but they should say something like, now we know the student is referring back to investments. So one of my first investments would be in telecommunications companies, and they need the IES. So they had an issue with plural versus singular, and liquor enterprises too. And they should have a comma after enterprises. And it's looking like a simple sentence. Then we have, so I think they mean winos rather than winnows. Winos and internet obsessive will exist almost forever. Ha ha ha, in parentheses, period. So I think what they mean is, you know, wine wine drinkers and uh, people obsessed with the internet will exist forever. I would definitely remove the ha ha ha, because again, that is casual. And then using words like winos is a little bit, again, not a little bit, quite slang. And what they're probably saying, or maybe they mean drinkers, or people who drink. They probably don't want to say alcoholics. So you want to say something like people who drink and people who obsess over the internet, or obsess over the internet will exist almost forever. But that's not what they wrote. We have some capitalization issues, and they set this up as a simple sentence. The next sentence says, nice money on those markets. Okay, that is a fragment. And I think that what they're saying is that they would make probably a profit on investing in those particular markets, but we're not really sure. It's a fragment, and so definitely an issue there. However, notice how all the ideas connect within that mini paragraph. And again, I really appreciated that mini musical adventure. That was very clever writing. Moving on to the next paragraph. In this case, I believe that would be paragraph 4. So we had 1, 2, and then we had 3, and then now we're moving on to paragraph 4. If those 3 points come true, it would be a pleasure to become an unphilanthropist, help people of the world with bizarre diseases. Okay, so again, the student uses a complex sentence. If those 3 points, if those 3 maybe dreams would come true, comma, it would be a pleasure to become a philanthropist, period. Or they could say to become a philanthropist and help people around the world who have bizarre diseases, or and help people with bizarre diseases, or and help um, people with bizarre diseases around the world. So it's a little bit awkward. It's a complex sentence, but it becomes a little bit weird, because again, this idea of we know philanthropists help people, it's great word choice, and that's what a philanthropist does. But this idea of the world with bizarre diseases, it makes it seem like the world is the one with the world is the one with the bizarre diseases, rather than people are the ones with the bizarre diseases. So that would need to be addressed. Then the next sentence says, people suffering of hunger. So in this case, what they're trying to say is, maybe I would also help people who are suffering of hunger, suffering with hunger. As written, it's technically a fragment. Moving on to the next sentence, and yes, of course, right writers, we see some capitalization issues, and that seems to be definitely the running issue throughout this student's sentences. Next sentence, it says, I think when you have nothing to care about in your personal life, you start to care about others, people, way of living. Am I right? Question mark, ha ha. So in this case, I think they meant personal instead of persona. So I get what they're saying here. Um, and they're again using a complex sentence, but this idea of using the ellipses and then am I right and then multiple question marks, ha ha ha, or ha ha, it's again, right writers, very casual, and it's almost as if the student is writing a text message. So we're getting into some issues here of formality. You want to be more formal in your writing. The next paragraph, it says, I would like to save some dolphins too. Nah, no way. Again, very casual. It's sort of like joking, but you're going from a serious topic of helping people with bizarre diseases to helping people who suffer from hunger, and then trying to be funny with saving the dolphins. And again, being casual and comedic, using comedy in a way that seems informal and uncomfortable. So we want to be careful of that. Then the next sentence, it says, I think I wouldn't be a nice philanthropist. And again, we've got the contraction. I think I would not be a nice philanthropist. That sentence is written correctly. However, again, it's sort of contradicting the idea of, hey, I want to be a philanthropist. And then they're like, no, I don't think so. And again, that sort of um, contradicts the thinking, the writing, and also makes the writer almost unreliable. It's almost like a turnoff to the reader, and they're toying with the reader, and that becomes quite uncomfortable. Then it says, "But I would give it a try, 100% sure!" Exclamation point. Period. So in this case, they should have used a conjunctive adverb. However, I would give it a try, 100% sure, rather than using a conjunction, but. And if they used however, they would want to use a comma. As is, it looks more like a fragment. And then again, notice that contradiction. On the positives, the student all focused on one idea, and that is the idea of philanthropy. Moving on to paragraph 5. Then they go on to say, then after all those no sense or nonsense ideas, I would like to rejoin musical studies. And again, the plural issues of studies in that case. So they do transition into the next paragraph and then again contradict those nonsensical ideas about being a philanthropist, which makes the writer seem unreliable and untrustworthy. Then they move on to the next sentence. Um, and again, this then after all those nonsense ideas, comma, or then, comma, after all those nonsense ideas, comma, I would like to rejoin musical studies, which would be a simple sentence. Moving on, to know some of my to know some more of my beloved art, music, especially, it sounds like, or specifically guitar. So again, we've got a fragment. We don't really have a verb. To know is an infinitive, and so that's the problem with this sentence. But notice how they're still on topic, discussing guitar. Then the next sentence says or reads, I would be composing all day long and studying how to handle harmonies in every way it could be possible. So in this case, they could just say in every way possible. And this sentence is actually a pretty good sentence. I would be composing all day long and studying how to handle harmonies in every way possible. That would have been a beautiful sentence, and it would have been a beautiful, simple sentence. Moving on to the next sentence. Finally, I would dedicate all possible time to teach my kids how to do a relationship with music and real life. That's a big, bizarre issue. You got to believe me, guys. Okay, so that sentence is not too bad. I mean, just a comma, finally, comma. I would dedicate all possible time to teach instead of my kids, to teach my children how to have a relationship with music in their life, period, and not bring in the side commentary of the ha ha ha's and the that's a big bizarre issue. You got to believe me, guys. And notice how they say you got to believe me. So again, hinting to that untrustworthiness of the writer, and it really takes away from their writing. That said, they do stay on topic of musical studies, music, guitar, harmonies, and the relationship between music and real life. And then they end with their last paragraph here, conclusion. Well, those are the basic ideas that comes to my mind. Fine sentence, really. They just need some commas. Well, comma, those are the basic ideas that come to mind. And that is a simple sentence. Then they go on to say, I think most of it are dreams of childhood, but who isn't a child on his own mind most of the day? Very clever sentence. They would need a comma here before the but. I think most of these are dreams of childhood, or most of these are childhood dreams, comma, but who isn't a child in his own mind most of the day? It's a beautiful sentence. And it's almost really wanting to be a compound complex sentence, but we've got a few little issues with commas and some missing words. Then moving on, I think every one of us have a kid in our brain, but we have to know how to control him. Perhaps I can't control him much. This is definitely a run-on sentence in this case, right, writers? I think every one of us has a child in our brain, comma, but we have to know how to control our child, and then how to control our child, period. Then perhaps, comma, I cannot control mine as much, because when we're using him and we're talking about everyone, we're moving, in different person, from first person to then third person, and back to you know third person. And it sounds weird because he goes from I to him, and so that's a little bit of an issue. And then we go to us, everyone, third person, and our, and we. So there's definitely some person issues, first person, second person, third person, in this particular sentence, besides also being a run on. Then the next sentence states, I think many of us were dreaming at 10 probably years old with being a super sports star. So again, they're staying on the topic of dreaming and being 10 years old, but they transition awkwardly into becoming a super sports star. It would have been more clever if the writer had talked about maybe becoming a musical pop star, because they had focused so much on music. And so I think that would have worked better. Obviously, we see some issues with capitalization. I think many of us were dreaming at 10 years old with being a super sports star, and that may or may not be true for all students or all people. So be careful just making assumptions about your reader or about your audience. Moving on to the next sentence, this childhood dream keeps me awake many nights thinking in how to become a football superhero. It never happened, but I still remember with some melancholy. And so, again, in this case, we're getting this idea of athleticism, but based on what the student had previously written, it sounded more like they want to be a pop star, or a musician, a popular musician of some sort. And so this really throws us off base, and we're still focused on childhood dreams, which is excellent, but we're in a very different world than was presented earlier in the paragraphs that we had previously read. And so please be careful of that, right, writers, shifting topics into something totally different, which the reader finds unexpected, is not expecting this. It's unexpected, but it's unexpected in an awkward way. Then we again have a run on. This childhood dream keeps me awake many nights thinking in how to become a football superhero. It never happened, but I still remember with some melancholy. So we obviously see that it's a run on. And this childhood dream keeps me awake many nights thinking in how to become a football superhero, period. It never happened, comma, but I still remember it or remember this dream with some melancholy. Love the use of the word melancholy. Excellent word choice. Then the student ends with, I think I have nothing to add here now. I'm leaving. See you. Good luck. Okay, so obviously they were sort of grappling for more ideas. So this is not the right way to end this paragraph. I would never say, and please, writers, do not say, I have no further ideas. See you later. Um, if they were writing this correctly, it would say something like, I think I have nothing to add here, period, or comma, now I'm leaving, or semicolon, now, comma, I'm leaving. See you, good luck. Okay, this is not something we want to add. I think it would have been clever if they would have said, ended with something about being a musical pop star, it and how it never happened, but I still remember it with some melancholy, and that would have been a fantastic way to end this essay. However, ending it in this way is a bit awkward, and we do not want to let the reader know that you have nothing else to say and nothing else to add. That for me, writers, would be a big no-no. On the positive side, again, I think this writer had great voice. I love how the writer broke this up into mini paragraphs or baby paragraphs. And I also love how the writer stayed on topic within each paragraph. Um, I thought that was really great, and I could definitely see why this writer scored a 3 out of 6, because again, they stayed on topic in many of the paragraphs, and I think that was a good call. My only issue would be, I am returning back to it, writers. My only issue is that, again, the ending was terrible, and they should have brought in the musical piece definitely in the end, and again, this idea of being a pop star. Well, writers, thank you so much for joining me in this video. Watch out for slang. Watch out for sounding like you're sending text messages and the ha ha ha's. Um, I have nothing more to add here in this video. I will see you next Tuesday, writers. Thank you so much for subscribing and joining me. We will be looking at sample essays which scored a 4, or a sample essay which scored a 4 next week, next time we see each other. Thanks again, writers. Have a great rest of your week. Love you guys. Thank you for subscribing and watching videos. I appreciate it. Take care. Cruise out. Bye bye.